To all those who in one way or another were involved in bringing me home, as Dr. Jorge commented.
That was the voice of Alex Saab, Special Envoy from the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela to the Islamic Republic of Iran, speaking through an interpreter as he was released from U.S. custody last week.
Jorge said a few minutes ago, I was kidnapped, tortured, isolated, slandered, defamed, and after 1,286 days, they could not prove a single crime. They could not present a single piece of evidence. Not against me, not against Venezuela. This is a historic moment in which Venezuela reasserts itself as the only way, with the firm conviction of President Nicolás Maduro that dialogue bears greater fruit than hatred.
Saab was appointed Special Envoy of the government of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela on April 9, 2018, by the then Minister of Foreign Affairs of the government of President Nicolás Maduro. The Special Envoy was granted broad powers to act on behalf of Venezuela, aimed at guaranteeing commercial and humanitarian procurement of basic necessities, including foodstuffs, medical equipment, and other machinery, in the search for solutions to the problems resulting from the U.S. embargo against that country, which were imposed by the Obama administration in 2015. Special Envoy Saab was en route for a third trip to Iran from Caracas when he was captured during a layover between flights in Cape Verde in June of 2020, after a July 2019 indictment in the U.S. District Court of the Southern District of Florida. Despite a judgment of the Court of Justice of ECOWAS, dated the 15th day of March in 2021, which ordered his immediate release, the Special Envoy was handed over to the U.S. on October 16, 2021, and has remained in U.S. custody until his release last week. For more on that, we go to Managua, Nicaragua, to speak with journalist Camila Escalante.
Well, just last week, Saab was put on a plane back to Venezuela following his negotiated release from the United States after 3.5 years of illegal incarceration. He was, of course, this special envoy on a humanitarian mission to Iran and was helping the government circumvent the unilateral coercive measures or sanctions that make it difficult for governments, in this case Venezuela, to import food, medicine, supplies, spare parts, etc. And in this case, he was on that mission to Iran, one of the most fundamental and strategic allies of Venezuela over the last several years, particularly as the sanctions were taking a huge toll on the quality of life in Venezuela. And he was, or should have been, he was entitled to diplomatic immunity from criminal prosecution under international law. And so this all took place, of course, in Cape Verde in mid-2020. It was amid a fuel stop on the way to Iran to negotiate these deals for Venezuela. And so he was freed by presidential pardon by Joe Biden. And this is the end of a very long and widespread campaign to get him freed by people all across the world. There was a huge movement to free Alex Saab, even in places like Haiti, where social movements were holding an annual things like pickets or online pickets. And a lot of people had demanded his release because, of course, it's a completely illegal. It was a hostage situation. He should have been protected by that diplomatic immunity, and it sets a very dangerous precedent that somebody like him could be detained and arrested and charged while carrying out their diplomatic duties. And so the government of Venezuela said that, he had been detained under cruel, inhumane, and degrading treatment, that it was violating his human rights and violating the Vienna Convention that grants him that diplomatic immunity. And they said that Alex Saab is a victim of retaliation by the United States government for his exceptional international efforts in protecting social rights of all Venezuelans in the face of the intensification of unilateral coercive measures.
The United States has a habit of ignoring the conventions, well-established legal conventions with respect to diplomats. I'm thinking about Evo Morales, who was on his way through Europe back to Bolivia. He was the president of Bolivia at the time, and they had his plane pulled over and forced down to Austrian airspace. It was rerouted to Austria when France, Spain, and Italy denied him access because they said Edward Snowden might be on board.
Precisely. So this is more of the U.S. strategy of attempting to villainize Venezuela's elected government and the Islamic Republic of Iran. They're attacking these South-South relations, which are crucial right now in the context of a world that's being reconfigured, in the context of these different sanctioned countries trying to find other ways to go about trade, finding other allies, be it large economies, large countries like Russia and China, or other countries like Latin American governments trying to cooperate with one another without having to go through the United States. And, these governments, of course, are saying that they don't recognize these illegal sanctions that are being imposed unjustly and unilaterally against their people. And there have been all of these different reports and findings by UN rapporteurs and more that show how detrimental these sanctions have been to the populations of these countries. And the United States is trying to attack this key relationship. It was Iran that was so key in Venezuela during those years, particularly perhaps 2018 to 2021. In the recovery of the Venezuelan economy, because they were able to provide some spare parts necessary for Venezuela to recover its oil sector production when no other country was doing that, even some larger allies of Venezuela, let's say. And so that was absolutely crucial. And so, the United States completely failed in its coup attempt, its regime change attempt against Venezuela. And so this was one of the last things that they have tried to do. And in doing so, they're also smearing at the same time Iran, who's, if you look at, talking about what's going on in the world today and Palestine, and of course the United States calls Hamas a terrorist organization. That is actually, an armed force, but it's not a military of a country. The United States has actually sanctioned the Iranian military, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps. They have sanctioned all sorts of entities inside of that country. So Iran is just a country that its government officials, its military officials, its press directors for all of its media are just being sanctioned, one of the most sanctioned countries in the world. So of course it's always looking to different friendly countries and allies to try to keep things running as normal, for as long as they can, until we can find new means of going about things, as the U.S. is obviously continuing to decline, and as we see all of the U.S.'s failures abroad, be it in Ukraine, be it in their regime change strategy in Latin America and everywhere else.
Part of the swap that was negotiated by Qatar, apparently, or brokered by Qatar, was a guy known as Fat Leonard. His name is Leonard Francis, who was accused of scamming the U.S. Navy, that another report characterized as being the biggest ripoff scandal in the history of the U.S. Navy.
Among the other people who were released in this prisoner swap were people who part of a mercenary plot. These are two of the names that were released that a few years ago, when the U.S. was trying to, through various means, overturn the Venezuelan government. These people were part of a plot that was planned and organized in the U.S. and Colombia and attempted to be executed. And those people were discovered by the Venezuelan security forces and brought to justice. All of these people have been convicted of some crime or another. None of them were unjustly detained or political prisoners or anything like that. But that's, of course, what the United States is alleging. And so obviously, Alex Saab was quite an important person to have been released in exchange for 11 criminals that belong back in the United States.
Camila, thank you very much for your insight on this case, and we'll speak with you again next week.
Thank you very much, Don.
For KPFK, I'm Don DeBar.